On behalf of the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research at Georgia State University, I welcome you to the 8th Annual World Languages Week. CULTR, as the center is known, is one of 16 federally funded Title VI language resource centers in the United States. CULTR has created a unique identity around serving the needs of all students and the communities they represent by helping to promote language learning opportunities as part of a 21st century global education. Guided by its core values of access, advocacy, outreach, and research, CULTR has gained a national reputation for innovative approaches to promoting access to language education for all students, regardless of their socioeconomic and ethnic background. I am Laura Boudon, Director of Study Abroad Programs at Georgia State, and I'd like to thank you for being here today for the Language Learning and Study Abroad panel, which I am moderating. Before introducing the panelists, I'd like to address a couple of housekeeping and technical questions. First, I'd like to remind everyone that all panels this week are being recorded and will be available after the event. All attendees will remain muted throughout the entire session. Our panel discussion of approximately 35 to 40 minutes will be followed by Q&A with you, the attendees. Students may submit questions throughout the course of the discussion and after in the Q&A box by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. If you like questions you see, click the thumbs up icon to promote this question to the top of the list. The resource links will be entered in the chat, so thank you for using the Q&A for your questions. Now let's meet the panelists. We have with us today Dr. Victoria Rodrigo, Professor of Spanish and Director of Spanish Studies in Granada, Spain, Stephanie Alvarado, and Sophia Berman. But I'd like to give them a chance to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about themselves.
Well, I guess I am the first one. Huh? So first, hello and good afternoon, everybody. First, I would like to thank CULTR and Study Abroad Office for the invitation. I am very pleased to be here today and share my 2 cents, right? As Laura said, Victoria Rodrigo, I am professor of Spanish in the Department of World Languages and Cultures, where I teach Spanish and applied linguistics in the BA master program. And I am the director of Spanish Studies in Granada. That is one of the programs that Georgia State has. That's my introduction, Laura.
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Stephanie. It's great to be here. Stephanie Alvarado. I studied journalism and French. Those are my 2 degrees, and I got a minor in speech communications. I'm actually a recent grad. I graduated in August, and it's great to be here as an alum. So I'm looking forward to, like Dr. Rodrigo said, sharing my 2 cents on my experience while abroad and learning my 3rd language abroad.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sophia Berman. I am an English major, Spanish minor, and I'm in my sophomore year. My study abroad program was the Spanish Studies in Granada this past summer with Dr. Rodrigo.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to begin with a question for Dr. Rodrigo. Dr. Rodrigo, why do you lead this study abroad program each year to Granada?
Well, I have so many reasons. It is a fantastic opportunity for the students, for me. And I really enjoy leading the program because it's a very rewarding experience, not only for me, but for the students. And it makes me feel accomplished as a teacher, and I will explain later why, very briefly. And also it allows me to go back to my native Spain. I am from Granada, from the city where I take the program. And it is a lovely southern Spanish city, and I very I feel very proud to share with my students my culture, my traditions, everything. So I said that it's rewarding, and it is rewarding because I can see how in 6 weeks the students can grow so much at both levels, at linguistic level and also at personal level. At linguistic level, a language, as they are immersed in the language, I can see how fast they improve in their Spanish skills and how confident they are every day. And also there is something very important about studying abroad, is that they can grow as a person, because living in another country makes a big difference when you want to experience other ways of thinking, realities, traditions. And in that way, students can become familiar with other ways of doing things, and they become more open-minded and more open to accepting and embracing other cultures. And I think this is really, really important, because if they don't know, if they only know what they have around them, it's like they live in a bubble, and they will not see how different and interesting other places could be. So I like to help them discover that. And if may I share something that students almost every time when we finish the program, they tell me, they say that going to this program, and I guess that could be extended to any study abroad program, is a life-changing experience for them. And that's true. I can see that. For instance, I can see their faces illuminating when they see in a real place and time what they have studied in the textbooks, when they see the painting, a palace, a city, dance, flamenco, food, everything. So that makes the study, what they are studying, more relevant and interesting. And the last thing, doing this program allows me to develop a special bond with my students. We keep in contact years after the program, and I'm very grateful for that. So it's good for them and also for me. I love it. It's fantastic. So I would say leading this program is a very rewarding for me in all senses, and I embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stephanie and Sophia, why did you choose to study French or Spanish on a study abroad program this summer?
Do you want to go first, Sophia, or I could go?
I could go first.
Okay.
Sure. All right, so I studied Spanish in Granada, and I chose the program because I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to improve my Spanish speaking skills while being completely immersed in the Spanish culture. And you don't get that here in the United States. Like if somebody speaks Spanish, they'll usually like talk to you in English, and you just don't get that same like practice and learning opportunity as you would abroad. And so that's why I chose it, because I wanted to really improve my Spanish speaking skills.
Likewise, I studied French, actually. I studied French and Tours France with Dr. Huff. It was a great program. It was a semester, and I chose to study abroad and continue my study of the language in French while abroad, because it's different interacting in a society where the first language or the primary language is the language that you're learning. It's the language that you hear in the streets. I stayed with a host family, and it was the language that my host family spoke, and they didn't speak any English. And so I had to speak French, practice my French. Sitting at the dining table, I had to say some words in French. And by the end of it, like Dr. Rodrigo said, I definitely had more confidence in my abilities as a speaker. So that was the angle that I wanted to like approach things with, was gaining confidence and being able to speak it, because I can read it and write it, but speaking is different. And so that's something that I got out of that.
Great. So this question is for all of you. What is different about studying languages abroad as opposed to a classroom here in downtown Atlanta?
Who should start? Maybe them? I don't know. Or me. I don't. What do you want?
I'd like to share one. Mine is quick, so I can go first. It'll be fast. I think that for me, it was that realizing that different languages have emotion sounds different, if that makes sense. So like in Spanish, it's my first language, the emotion sounds different, and the intonality of the words is different than in English. And in French, it's the same thing. And so that's something that I like picked up, was like in the classroom in Atlanta, we were all learning French. And so we all kind of just sounded like this, like when we talked, because we didn't know where to inflict the words. And then when I got to France, it was just like this, like and I had a little brother in my host family who was 11, and he had so much energy, and I could tell when he was upset because of the inflection in his voice. So that's something that is very valuable and was very valuable for me during my study abroad.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the same for me, because in my classes at the University of Granada, my professors actually taught us like how to speak with emotion. So those were some really, really fun classes. And also, like, my host mom, just like Stephanie was saying, did not speak English, and neither did my professors. And just like people I saw on the street did not speak English. So it was just, I really did have to like force myself to use like all the theory I had learned and actually apply it to daily life.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. And but all of that happens because the main difference between studying Spanish or French in France or in Spain and here in Atlanta campus is the context of instruction and what it entails. That's it. Studying abroad means being immersed in the language and culture 24/7. So you have been exposed, you too, and everybody who goes abroad, to the target language in every situation and conversation. So the big difference is that when you are abroad, there are no limits on when, where, or how much contact you may have with the language. So the quantity of the exposure of the language is key. And the exposure of the language, you don't have it only in the classroom as in Atlanta, but you have it also outside while you are doing other things. Another important thing I believe is a big difference, and it goes in positive for all of you, is the quality and relevance of this exposure of the language. Why? Because when you are abroad, the students, you decide what to hear, what to see or talk about, to whom, with whom interact. So you are using the language in the real context and with a specific purpose. You also choose about the topics you want to talk, something what you are interested, and you can negotiate the meaning with native speakers. You interact with native speakers. That's why you said, the both of you, that you are more used to the intonation, what the intonation means, right? And yeah, this is one of the big things I believe is the difference between one or another. If we study abroad, is a natural context for interaction that is relevant and significant for you guys, for the learners. It's massive exposure to the target language and real purpose. Yeah, and that's only possible abroad.
Thank you. Stephanie and Sophia, what do you see as the benefits and impact of studying abroad on you as a person, as a language learner, and as a future professional? I know that's a little bit of a long question, but please do share your thoughts on that question.
I can go first because I wrote little notes on this, so I'm just gonna kind of expand on it. Personally, I am definitely, it was a pleasant surprise that it was friendship. I went in and I went with a cohort of Georgia State students, and I was surprised that the tours was just so youthful. And there was like a university there as well. And so there was French students from France who spoke French as their first language, and being able to interact with people outside of school and make those friendships was a huge like personal benefit, I guess you could say. And I also, like Dr. Rodriguez was mentioning, the consistent exposure to the language, like the target language. I picked up some slang, and I learned that French youth, when they want to say like, "Hey, what's up?" they say "wesh," like "wesh," and I would have never learned that in a classroom. So that was one thing personally. As for the learner part, the language acquisition, being more confident in my speaking abilities and professionally, it you'd be surprised how many people speak French or the language that you're learning. And right now I'm in DC in my office and like our building. And one of my coworkers actually lived in France for like a year, and French was her second language. And we were able to like connect on that on a professional level. And I do research on the economy, and sometimes like I draw from other countries, and because I can read and speak French, I can read documents that are in French. And so like having that and being able to provide that in the workplace has been super awesome.
That's really great. I found like the same with friendships, and I also picked up some Andalusian slang, which obviously I can't use with any of my Spanish professors, but at least I have that knowledge. But also I found that personally, I grew a lot in my like independence, because before going on the trip, I went the summer of my freshman year of college. So before, I had never really gone on a trip or done anything without my family. But here I was in a completely foreign country with a group of GSU students. But when I was with my host mom, I was alone. I was like the only person here from Atlanta. And so I learned that I actually could like do all these things by myself. I could communicate effectively. And about that, as I mentioned, my host mom, she did not speak English at all. So I had to use all the Spanish I know. If I didn't know a word, I thought of a synonym, or I would explain the word using Spanish. And then she would correct me, like she would offer me the new vocabulary, or she'd correct my grammar. And that just really, talking to her on a daily basis over all the meals, just really brought up my Spanish. And for professional wise, I think that after spending 6 weeks speaking only Spanish, I like to say that I'm more or less fluent. So now I'm trilingual, and knowing more than one language is definitely useful in the professional field, because you can communicate with like a much larger range of people. And having been exposed to the Spanish culture, I can also have like a greater cultural competence when working with colleagues or clients.
Thank you all. So for all of you, what tips do you have for students who are considering study abroad? And so, as you think about who could be in the audience, it could be your fellow GSU students, but I know that World Languages Week also does a lot of outreach to high school students. So it could also be high schoolers who may or may not be coming to Georgia State, but may be thinking about studying a language abroad in the future during their college career. So would love to hear some of the tips you would have for your fellow students.
Oh, Dr. Rodrigo, I think that you're muted.
I am sorry. No, I was saying that you guys go first, because then I can add, because I am sure you're going to say things that I have in mind.
I can share things that come to mind. So first is speaking to all like first-gen students out there, you can do it and it's possible. I am the eldest daughter of an immigrant family, and the idea of going abroad was like really scary for my parents, and they were kind of a little bit, not, I don't want to say against it, but they were definitely very wary of it, and they were like, why do you want to go study in France if you can get your French classes here in Atlanta? Like, there's no need to go all the way across the ocean. You're going to be on a plane for 8 or 9 hours. Like, what? That's kind of unnecessary. But I did it anyway. And I'm really grateful that I did. And so that's just something to like keep in mind, that like, yes, it might be scary for your parents or your guardian, but it's possible. You can do it and you're going to be okay.
Mhm.
And to add on to that, I just wanted to say, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, you're in a completely different country, but you will still be with a program, whether it's GSU led or not. You have people, you have resources there to help you, whether you need mental help or like anything that could arise from studying abroad, being in a foreign country, first time or not, but it can be overwhelming at times. So definitely don't be afraid to ask for help.
Okay, so my tips are going to be in a different direction, are going to be in how you can take the most about the experience in terms of your language competence and cultural competence. So I would say, at the moment that you arrive in the country, Spain, France, any place, forget about your English while you are abroad. Forget. Use the target language all the time with your family, teachers, friends, peers. If not, why you go abroad, right? You want to go abroad to be exposed as much as possible to the language. Go to movies, go to watch TV, series, read books, meet locals. That's very important. Mingle with the Spanish friends, make Spanish friends and go out with them. And keep a log of new words that you learn every day and try to use it in the conversation. So I think these are tips that can help you when you are there for the language experience, not in the other sense, but yes. Those are my tips. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. What great tips. We also know that prospective study abroad students are interested in how you funded your study abroad experience. So how did you fund your study abroad experience, and did you apply for any scholarships?
All right, I can go first. So I applied for the Gilman Scholarship, and I definitely recommend that to anyone who is a Pell Grant recipient. The application process was very simple. You do have to write 3 essays, but they're also very simple. They are why you want to study this program and how it will help you in the future, how you'll get over like misunderstandings or challenges abroad, and what you'll do for your follow-on service project. So it's only those 3 short essays, and the application, like besides that, is very simple. So for Pell Grant students, definitely that. And that on top of the GSU IEF, that completely covered my trip. So I was able to go with the Gilman and the IEF.
Let me add to that. I'm going to share a link really quickly. It's the GSU Study Abroad page on funding your study abroad. And so on this link, you'll be able to see different scholarships. And something that I'm really grateful about that Georgia State does is that when you apply to a program, I applied to a faculty-led program. So my application for my faculty-led program was also an application to some scholarships that they offer, including the IEF and IAS scholarships. And I actually received the International Access Scholarship. So that was one way that I funded my study abroad program, as well as the Honors College. The Honors College has a lot of scholarships, and I applied to their study abroad scholarship, and I didn't get that, but I did get the Empowering Excellence Award, and I'll share that link in a second. But that is how I funded my study abroad. And in addition to that, I didn't particularly apply to this scholarship, but I think that it put me in the running for the College of Arts and Sciences Study Abroad Scholarship. And I got an email for it, and I somehow, like, something happened somewhere, and I'm really grateful for it, because with those 3 scholarships, I was able to fund my month abroad in France, in addition to some personal savings. I knew I was going to study abroad, so I worked so I could have money to spend on things that I wanted and not feel like I was on a really tight budget.
Those are some really wonderful tips about applying for scholarships and how to fund your study abroad. As Director of Study Abroad Programs, I just wanted to take a second to mention a little bit about some other scholarship opportunities that are specifically focused on language learning abroad. And that would be the Boren Scholarship and Fellowship, which is for really 1 academic year of language learning abroad, and also the Critical Language Scholarship, which you can also apply for, and that is also specifically to learn a language abroad. And then I'll say a word about the International Education Fee Scholarship and the International Access Scholarship. So Georgia State is very committed to study abroad, and so most students who study abroad from Georgia State receive at least the International Education Fee Scholarship, which is at least $1,000. And then for students who have financial need, they are eligible for the International Access Scholarship, and they could receive anywhere from $2,000 to $7,500. And so that really helps Georgia State students, be able to afford these experiences. And as Stephanie did mention, colleges also have additional scholarships for study abroad, and some of them you can explicitly apply for, and some of them you just will find out about by an email, which is what happened for Stephanie. So there's really are scholarships out there to help you and to support these experiences financially. So Stephanie and Sophia, what surprised you the most in your study abroad experience?
I have something that comes to mind immediately. I didn't expect for American culture to be present in France in the way that it was. And I say that because I live in the United States and I'm familiar with American pop culture. And when I went abroad, a point of conversation for people like students my age, the French youth, was questions about American culture, and they knew all of the artists from Atlanta and just rap music, and started to try to connect on that, and that really surprised me. I don't know why I was expecting for them to listen to Edith Piaf or something from way back when. That was a surprise for me, as well as the American chain restaurants in France. They McDonald's, their food definitely tasted different. And I didn't want to be the American that went to the McDonald's, but I had heard that it tasted different. So I went and I got a little burger and chicken nuggets, and it did not taste the same at all. And so I can confirm that McDonald's in France is not the same as McDonald's in Atlanta.
I can say that in Spain is the same. They have told me, because I don't eat this, I don't eat the McDonald's, but they have told me that it is different and it is better, they say.
It's definitely better. But one thing that surprised me, it was kind of a cliche, but I was worried about going to Spain to study Spanish, because I thought that the Spaniards would be very, very strict about their language, because everyone thinks, oh, Spanish, it comes from Spain, and all the Spaniards want you to speak the proper Spanish, but that wasn't the case at all. I never had any problems where people didn't understand me. Everyone always just tried to understand and tried to help me, and it was a very, very nice and very warm learning experience. It wasn't what I had thought it would be.
I'd actually like to add something that also just came to mind is I think my experience was unique in that I went to a language institute. It wasn't necessarily like a blended program with French students. It was an international school for students around the world to participate in like language acquisition for French. And in my class, there were students from the United States, from Oman, Saudi Arabia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and Brazil. And the language that connected us all was French. Like I couldn't just say a word or two in English because my class would look at me like, we have no idea what you're saying. So I had to like explain what I was trying to say or define a word in English using the French language. And so that was something that surprised me. I knew I was going into a French speaking like class, but I didn't know that it was going to have that international aspect. So that was really awesome as well, connecting with people abroad, like from like the entire world. And we had moments where we talked about our culture, or we had like an assignment where we had to share stories growing up, fairy tales, that's what they're called, fairy tales or anything related. And so hearing like fairy tales from each student from like Japan and like Brazil was interesting. And I was here sharing about Goldilocks. And so it was really cool to exchange that.
Thank you. And we are nearing the end of our questions, but I did want to remind our attendees to please put your questions in the Q&A. So please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. We're going to continue with another question here, but I wanted to kind of ask you to go ahead and start putting your questions in the Q&A. Stephanie and Sophia, could you share with us either the thing you liked the least or the thing you liked the most? Or we probably have time for both if you'd like. But what you liked the least or liked the most about your study abroad experience?
Okay, I can start with what I liked the most. This is kind of what Stephanie was saying earlier about friendship, but the sense of community, like the sense of community with my host family, with my international classmates at the University of Granada. We had students from Texas, Japan. I know there were some students from Ukraine also in the university. And also just the group of students from GSU, we all were able to bond like so well, going through this like incredible experience all together. And whenever we needed to just talk about anything or ask for advice, we had this group of people who we knew were in the same exact situation. So we could always rely on each other. And we always made sure that like we got home safe and like checked in on each other. And I just really like that sense of community. And as for least favorite thing, I need to think about it. I don't think I can think of anything off the top of my head.
For me, it was definitely that, what you mentioned about community. That was my favorite thing. And as to not repeat what you said, I'll kind of expand on another angle on that. And it's the community that the French people have with each other and how surprisingly welcoming they were. I didn't expect them to be so welcoming. And I feel like there was just so much joy all the time. Like my teacher, she was such a joyful person. And she, every day, like at 2 p.m. or whenever class ended, like she left. Like she wasn't going to linger around. She had things to do and like kids to be with and a life to live. And when I would get home, like my host mother, she was a stay-at-home mom. And every day, I would walk in, I would walk home. I'd struggle with the key because everything in France is historic. And so it wouldn't open. So it had its way and I had to like push the door. And she would always like look at me and turn from the kitchen because she home cooked every meal. And she would ask like, Stephanie, est ton jour? Aujourd'hui c'est bon? Like, was today great? Did you love it? And she was just so enthusiastic about me coming home and hearing what I had to say about my day. So that like aspect of joy, I feel like I experienced that everywhere that I was in France. As for my least favorite thing, I'll share this. The United States tends to have a lot of salt on their food. And when you go to France, you can taste that. you can taste that because you feel like you need a salt shaker at every meal. So for me, the food was very good, but I feel like it needed just a little bit more salt and maybe some black pepper or some salsa on the side. And that's just like, maybe it's a personal preference because I grew up on Mexican food, but nothing was spicy. It was just kind of like sweet and a flavor I'm not used to. So the food was good, don't get me wrong, but it needed a little something.
My least favorite thing was actually the opposite. I thought that the food in Spain was too salty because I don't usually eat food with a lot of salt. So yeah.
So we do have a couple of questions coming in. So the first question is, what was the hardest part of the process before going abroad?
I think for me, the hardest process before going abroad, I'm interpreting that question as like, in general, what was the hardest part before going abroad? And I think for me, it was deciding what program to go on, because there's a lot of programs at Georgia State as well as through other organizations. So finding the best fit for me was the hardest part. And then once I like decided on the program that I went on, it was pretty smooth. It was really, really smooth. There wasn't anything that was difficult. The only thing I will say is that once you're accepted into the programs at Georgia State, there's like a list of things that you have to do. And so once I got my acceptance, I just clicked open a link and it had like 17 things like to do, check marks. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much. Like there's so many waivers, so many forms, because we're studying abroad during a pandemic. It was my vaccination card and it was just so much. And so that was kind of overwhelming for me, but I took it day by day. Like every day I would do something. So I didn't do it all at once, but I had it done by the deadline, and it's because I broke it up a little bit.
Yeah, the paperwork was definitely a hassle for me as well, but also just the mental preparation, like just knowing that I'm going abroad without my family, without like anybody I know really, because I had only met my GSU group like when we got to the hotel in Madrid. So I think just mentally preparing myself, like, yes, right now I'm buying my own plane ticket. I'm getting on this plane by myself and I'm flying to a foreign country. I'm going to live there for 6 weeks. Once I got over that, I was fine.
I would say, Sophia, this is positive because you have to start using the language once you arrive in the country. So yeah, you have to fight for survival.
So another question that came in is, while you were abroad, was there a moment that was funny or embarrassing based on a cultural or linguistic misunderstanding?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, there were. I'll share the one story that comes to mind. I don't really get embarrassed easy, but I got embarrassed in this situation because we were at the dinner table, and in my family, my host family, was very adamant about having family dinner together. So every day at 7:30, we all sat down at the table and we like had our like napkins and we had like the forks and the setup, and it was very family oriented. And my host mother asked me if I was sleeping well or if I was still struggling to adjust to the time in France. And I was trying to tell her that I had melatonin, but I didn't know like how. I don't know why I didn't just think, oh, maybe I can say it with a French accent and she'll know what I'm saying. I just completely blanked, and I was like, man, how am I going to tell my host mother I have melatonin? Like, what's the word? And I was thinking, is it a medicine? How do I say medicine? It's not medicine because that's like doctor. Like, what's the word? So I sat there and I told her, oh, yes, I brought some drugs with me. I have a drug to sleep. I have some drugs with me and I'm doing great. And she literally froze and she was like, with the fork in her, and I think she was like, quoi? Like, what? And I was like, yeah, I have drugs. Yeah, I'm like using it to sleep. And she was like, in French, she was telling me, okay, no, we don't need to know that. What you brought with you is yours, and you don't have to tell us anything. And I remember thinking, why is she being weird about this? And then it wasn't until after dinner that I reflected and I was like, oh my gosh, what if she thought I meant like legit trust? And I was so embarrassed and I didn't know what to say or like if I should bring it up. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna let this one go. But that was pretty embarrassing.
For me, also over lunch and over dinner, I would talk to my host mom and I would tell her absolutely everything. Like it didn't matter like if I knew the Spanish word for it or not, I would improvise. And one time, like I don't remember anything super embarrassing that I said, but I remember I met a group from the UK and I didn't know the word for British. And I didn't want to say English because that could have meant like Americans. And I wanted her to know that there was a difference, that I met a group of British people, not like American people. So I was just telling her, and I called them Inglaterros. And she still, to this day, she texts me some days and she's like, hey, remember those Inglaterros? And I'm like, I didn't know the word. So it was really funny. It's ingleses, by the way. But she still texts me. She's like, remember those Inglaterros? And I'm, well.
That's so fun. So we have one more question. What are your top 3 tips for students who are on the fence about studying abroad?
I'll share too. Well, when I hear that question, I automatically think, what is keeping you on the fence? Like, why are you on the fence? And kind of flesh that out and understand why you're on the fence for studying abroad. And the second thing is just let in mind. I was going somewhere. Sophia, if you have something to say, you can go ahead and say that. But yeah, ask yourself, why am I on the fence? And then make your decision from there.
All right. So I would say one, do it, but that doesn't really help much. But I would say just the typical make a pros and cons list. Think about all the ways in which this could help you in your future. And this is personal. This is not a one size fits all answer. Just think about how this particular study abroad program could help you, whether it's learning a language or learning culture. How will it help you specifically?
Good. Oh, Dr. Rodrigo, did you want to add something? No. Did you want to add something?
No.
No. Okay,
Well,
sorry. I saw you like move like you were going to speak. So I was like, oh, maybe she.
I will, but at the end when you finish.
Okay, yeah.
If there is coming. I mean, if there is time.
Okay, thank you. I wrote down what I thought so I wouldn't forget it this time. And that would be to review your academic evaluation. If you don't know how to do this, I'm sure one of your friends knows how to, and obviously you can go to your student advisor, but find the time to review your academic evaluation to see if you have like where in what semester you could study abroad. And I'll share a little bit about my experience with that, just because I feel like my experience was not traditional in the sense that I went on a study abroad program once I had already like graduated. I had one more class to do, and I wanted that class to be a French class, and I had already finished my journalism degree, and I was about to be done with my French degree, and I just had the one class. And so I took the time to intern full time during the spring. And then for my May semester, I like technically like I had like finished my like I applied for graduation, like I finished my studies, and I had the opportunity to do the program as like the last thing before being completely done with college or undergrad. And so that's something that worked out in my favor, and that's how it aligned for me in my schedule. And that's not something I decided on a whim. I thought about it long and hard, and I looked at my academic evaluation, I spoke with my advisors, and we decided that it would work, and it ended up working really well for me.
Another tip I have is to consider funding options, because I know some scholarships, their deadlines for application are earlier than the deadlines for the program. So I would say to plan ahead and look at possible funding options and see if you would need to apply to those before the program.
And connecting with students who have done the program that you're interested in. So I'm talking specifically about the Georgia State programs because that's the ones that I'm familiar with. And definitely like find people, ask the director of the program if they can connect you with someone who was on the trip last year, and you can connect with that student and ask them all the questions that you want to know and get all the answers that you need to know before you make a decision, because that's something that I did as well. And it was super helpful just hearing someone's experience at the tourist program and knowing that they had done it and they were back and they were grateful for it and it was a great time. And so that I think would be super helpful.
Yeah, I would like to add that yes, that's true. And students, former students, they love to be in touch with the students who want to go abroad and share their experience. So that's a great way to do things smooth.
I'll add that in study abroad programs, we have peer advisors who are student assistants on our team, and most of them have studied abroad, so they're happy to also share their experience, and they can answer questions. And I know sometimes students are a little shy to, maybe ask a professional on our team a question, but you can ask a peer some of the questions that maybe you would be embarrassed or nervous to ask a fellow student. And I really appreciated what Stephanie was saying about, why are you still on the fence? I think that's a really good question for you to think about. Maybe you're afraid of some particular aspect of study abroad. But a question that I ask students regularly, so maybe going in a little bit of a different direction, is what are your goals with this study abroad program? You want the study abroad program to align with your academic goals, your professional goals, as well as your personal goal. Maybe you have a personal goal of traveling to a specific country or learning a specific language in a specific location. For those of you who study Spanish, you can study Spanish in Spain, but you can also study Spanish in Latin America. So, kind of digging into like, what is it academically that you are trying to do, but then personally also what kind of guides you to want to do this, and that can also, I think sometimes when we ask ourselves about why are we interested in this opportunity, that can really guide us and help us. And I will say, so one of my favorite quotes as director of study abroad programs is a quote from Lao Tzu. He says that every journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I think both Sophia and Stephanie have both said in a variety of ways that they broke up the process. So there was maybe a lot of tasks to do, but they did it little by little. And to me, that's part of it, is like all of it together, like even when I travel internationally, all of it together can be overwhelming. But if you start to break it down, yes, there is a day where you end up buying the plane ticket, and that's kind of like a big decision, right? But, the day that you complete the health clearance form might be one day you do the waiver, one day, so all of these little pieces, all of these small tasks along the way are totally manageable. So it's totally doable. And you can't think about all the steps all at the same time, because that can be overwhelming.
Yeah, and I would like to add something to what Laura and the panelists have said, is that really consider going abroad. Look for the place that fits your needs, the language, and put it as a goal. You are going to be so happy at the end. It's true that it's time, a lot of things to do to prepare. You can be scared, but at the end, it's going to be a very, very grateful experience. You're going to be very happy. So think about that. Put it a goal for you in the short or long run.
And one of our attendees writes that I'm very shy and afraid I'll be overwhelmed in a new place and trying to speak a new language. So I didn't know if you wanted to maybe comment on that, and that will be our last question for this panel?
Yeah, I was actually working on a message to type it out just in case we didn't get to it. And so I'll kind of read what I wrote and then I'll add on to it. Even for people who are not shy, it is overwhelming. And I suggest you challenge yourself and study abroad. I will say that in my program, there were people who were shy and they were out there and they were sharing with me, like, I'm shy, like I'm nervous, like this is a lot for me. And it was about finding that friendship, and you have that community with the students that you go with through the Georgia State program, and like letting one or two people know, like, hey, I'm more shy and I sometimes get overwhelmed, and is it okay if we go to this event together, or is it okay if we do this together? That way you're not alone. And then eventually you start meeting more people, and you start meeting people who speak the language in, or their target language in the country that you're living in, and then you make friends. And if you know you get overwhelmed easily, or like for me, I get overstimulated very easily. And in Paris, I was so stimulated. There was people moving everywhere. There were so many smells. There was different languages because it's like such an international city. And what I did was I just like took it real slow. I didn't rush anywhere. I just did what I wanted. And I had one or two friends to do it, to like see the things I wanted to see. But I definitely suggest, you challenge yourself, you go study abroad and find ways that help you manage your overwhelming feelings. So if it means doing less in the day, then do less. If it means not going to every event Monday through Friday and only one or two, you can do that as well.
Exactly. I wanted to add that you're not just going to be shy abroad, you're shy here as well. So just remember those coping mechanisms that you use right now and apply those abroad. And like, I'm pretty shy as well, but for me, I say fake it till you make it. So be outgoing, make some friends, definitely. We had a buddy system in Spain, which was really nice. But some days you will need to just step away from everything and take a break. Just go home and relax, and that's completely fine.
Yeah, that's normal. It's normal. It's normal. It's part of the process of going abroad and being in a place where you are not comfortable, a language you are learning, you don't have a high skill. So it's normal, but you can do it. Don't worry. Mistakes are fine.
And I also want to add that, you can study abroad with a friend. There's no reason, if you have a friend who is also studying the language, you can, make a decision to study abroad with a friend so that, you have that friend along as well. Well, I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Victoria Rodrigo, Sophia Berman, Stephanie Alvarado. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experiences of learning languages on a study abroad program. This concludes our panel. On behalf of CULTR, thank you for joining us.